The Disciplines Essential in the Spiritual Aspirant. Part 17. Sri Muruganar, translated and presented by Robert Butler.
Vettai Ramana Guru Vettai Arunagiri Vindaya Mundai Ulavetrumai Poi Vettai Ramana Guru Vettai Arunagiri Vindaya Mundai Ulavetrumai Poi Chintayitir Yan Sarupate Irandara Wondru Ayinar Vettai Ramana Guru Vettai Arunagiri Vindaya Mundai Ulavetrumai Poi Chintayitir Yan Sarupate Irandara Wondru Ayinar Ninrolirha Anta Nilai Chintayitir Yantan Sarupate Irandara Wondru Ayinar Ninrolirha Anta Nilai Ninru Olirha Anta Nilai.
Father Guru Ramana, in days of yore, the wondrous form of Arunagiri wore. But now has he, with all distinctions gone, merged with my thought-free self as one. The state of duality is no more. May that state shine and ever endure.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana. So we'll get started today with Neṟis dealing with the topic mere theoretical knowledge. And the first one is Neri 75.
Sastirajalam Yellayindri Padarndu Adarnda Kaadu. Enave Mumukshukal Buddhi Tadumatrathirkku Eduvana அக்காட்டினின்று வெளிப்பட்டு தத்துவ ஞானிபால் தத்துவம் உணர்ந்தே பாசபந்த விடுதலை அடைய வேண்டும்.
Robert.
Vast proliferation of Holy Scriptures is like a broad, dense forest that extends without limit. Therefore, those who desire liberation should leave that forest, which is the cause of their mind's delusion, learn the truth from a realized sage, a Tattvajnani, and gain release from worldly bondage.
So with regards to this Neri, Robert has a comment. Please go ahead, Robert.
Before coming to Bhagavan, Muruganar was a well-respected Tamil scholar who served on the prestigious committee that was compiling the definitive Tamil dictionary, the Madras Tamil lexicon, one of the greatest dictionaries ever produced in any language. It was only after he came to Bhagavan that he began to realize the impossibility of gaining true spiritual knowledge through such intellectual means. In fact, Neri 75 is virtually autobiographical in that it encapsulates the important elements of Muruganar's entire journey to self-realization, the involvement in intellectual pursuits, the realization of their delusive nature and consequent desire for liberation, the learning of the truth from a realized sage, and the final release from worldly bondage.
Do you have any further comment on this?
Well, Muruganar is well qualified to comment on the situation of intellectual learning, because he'd spent his whole life, he was 10 years older than Bhagavan, so by the time he came to Bhagavan, he was about 34. He spent a whole life in intellectual pursuits, and it hadn't gotten him anywhere. So this Neri really is very much a summary of the way his life went, you know, up to that age of 34 years.
Right. So he really criticizes people pursuing, ultimate spiritual knowledge from books.
But he took a very extreme attitude, because he swore that on coming to Bhagavan, he would never compose a single verse that wasn't about Bhagavan, and that's exactly what happened.
Right.
Sri Guru Ramana Prasadam is one of the latest works. It was so late, in fact, that Bhagavan didn't really see much of it. He was well advanced in his illness by then. So when he wrote these verses, Muruganar was a very mature devotee. He was realized, and he's reflecting back on what he was like when he came to Bhagavan, and he says, "I was a learned fool. My flawed mind knew nothing until I came to dwell with him, whose glance filled my heart with the light of awareness. Dwelling in that gracious state of peace, whose nature is Mona, so hard to gain and know, I entered into union with the deathless state of the knowledge of reality."
Right. So now let's go to the related Neri 47.
எவருக்குமே எளிதில் தெளிவாக விளங்கத்தக்க சிறு சிறு ஆப்த கிரந்தங்களை பண்டிதர்க்கே அரிதில் பயன்படத்தக்க சாஸ்திர ஜட்டிலமாக சால பறக்க சமைத்தலே பாஷ்யங்களுக்குரிய பண்பும் பயனும் போலும். நன்று நன்று.
It would seem that the nature and usefulness of learned commentaries, bhashyas, is that they take extremely brief, practical texts, suitable to be easily and clearly understood by all, and vastly expand them into convoluted scriptural tangles that are useful on rare occasions only to the learned. How good indeed. Nandra, Nandra, he says.
Yeah. Sarcastically.
Sarcastically, but ironically, I think we would say.
Yeah. So one of the things, like, which bothers me is, like, when sometimes I look at commentaries, there is a point, and then and to illustrate that, they keep on quoting. I mean, it's good to quote one or two, verses from other scriptures to drive home the point. But then I see sometimes commentaries which just go on and on and on, with no end in sight, running into pages. So a simple book, for example, like Gita, sometimes is made into a real torture. It's just they take one sloka and then they write like 10 pages of commentaries. It's sort of sometimes defeating the very point of it. So and that is what Muruganar is bringing forth. Take extremely brief practical texts and then expand it into very long scriptural tangles, which is not really useful for the many of the common people. Go ahead, Robert. You have some comment here.
Yes, and Neri 47 states the above case even more strongly. This is the case in the original Neri, with its suggestion that many commentators, unable to grasp the essence of the subject matter, cover their ignorance by writing long, convoluted commentaries, which virtually no one can follow. The result is that many people who sincerely believe that they are progressing towards their goal are actually wandering in a forest of intellectual concepts from which there is no way out. And that's literally true, because the forest is never ending. The whole point of them is to transcend the forest, to get above it, to get into the sky above the forest, if you like, not to be wandering through the trees. But if we keep following these sastraic trails of knowledge, then we'll just keep going around in circles and never leave the forest.
Right.
And I'm sure people have their own views on having done it themselves in many ways.
Right. Go ahead.
For example, the verses of Urdu Narpadu, Upadesha Undaya, and the other original works of Sri Ramana convey his message succinctly. Beyond this, the writings on Bhagavan, personal memoirs, recorded conversations, Advaitic exegesis, and so on, go out and down in a great pyramid, which is ever expanding at the base. Such writings have their place as a guide to devotees at certain points on the ascent of this notional pyramid, but we will be wise to always keep as our reference points those undiluted truths handed down directly, in our case by Bhagavan. Could be Ramakrishna, or it could be Vivekananda, but in our case it's Bhagavan.
Right. Okay, so now let's move on to Neri 64.
கற்றவர் விழுங்கும் கற்பகக் கனியே கல்லானெஞ்சில் நில்லான் ஈசன் என ஆன்றோர் வாக்குகளில் வரும் கல்வி கல்லாமைகள் முறையே அபரோக்ஷானுபவமான ஞானாஞானங்களையே உணர்த்துவன அன்றி பரோட்சமான சாஸ்திர ஞானாஞானங்களையோ அன்றி அதனிலும் கேவலம் எழுத்துப் படிப்பு வடிவான உலகியல் அறிவு அறியாமைகளையோ சற்றும் உணர்த்துவன அல்ல. கற்பனாரூபமான மனோமய பிரபஞ்சத்தில் உபசாரத்தால் கல்வி என கூறப்படுவது உண்மையில் கல்லாமையெனக் கண்டு அதனை கடியவே கற்றாரை யான் வேண்டேன் கற்பனவும் இனி அமையும் என மணிவாசகப் பெருமான் அக்கல்வியையும் அதனை மட்டும் கற்றாரையும் மறுத்து உரைப்பார் ஆயினர்.
Robert.
Sweet fruit of the wish-granting tree of paradise consumed by the learned ones. Lord who dwells not in the heart of the unlearned. Statements such as these by the great ones regarding learning and the lack of it refer, according to the context in which they appear, either to the direct, unmediated experience of knowledge and ignorance, or else to the indirect experience of knowledge and ignorance revealed by the scriptures. Next. They do not refer at all to the worldly knowledge and ignorance, which takes the form merely of the reading and writing in which those statements are expressed. That which is referred to euphemistically as learning in the world of the mind, which is purely a mental creation, is in reality only ignorance. It was on realizing this misunderstanding and desiring to correct it that the noble Manika Vachagar rejected that knowledge, and those who learn only that, declaring, I have no desire for the company of the learned. Of what is to be learned, I know enough already.
So the key point is that which is referred to euphemistically as learning in the world of the mind, which is purely a mental creation, is in reality only ignorance. It's pretty strong there, right? So that which is referred to euphemistically as learning in the world of the mind, which is purely a mental creation, is in reality only ignorance. It was on realizing this misunderstanding and desiring to correct it, that the noble sage Manikavasara rejected that knowledge, and those who learn that, declaring, I have no desire for the company of the learned, of what is to be learned, I have enough already. What is to be learned, I have enough, I know enough already. So at some point, I guess you have to stop, right? I mean, and spend more time on practice. And we could continue to use Bhagavan's direct works, as you mentioned before, to reinforce and to motivate us in our spiritual journey. But even after coming to Bhagavan, continuing to learn and read too many scriptures, it's actually detrimental to our spiritual progress. And Bhagavan makes it clear in many places. Michael also stresses this frequently. And in here you go, it's Muruganar is emphasizing the same point, that we want to be very focused. And that's what Robert is also pointing out here. So, yes, go ahead, Robert.
We spoke last week about meditation and how to use scriptures in meditation and go from one to the other, as it were. So what I used to do was I used to pick my sort of favorite scripture, whatever it was. Often it was Contis Immortalis, something like that. I would sit for meditation, then I would start reading. And at some point, Bhagavan would say something and you sort of, it's hard to express, but you drop off the edge. Suddenly the mind goes and then you're ready for meditation. You put the book down.
Exactly.
And that's a good way of using scripture, but to use scripture just to try, to try and work out the meaning of everything and piece it together like a jigsaw puzzle, it's never going to get us anywhere. Not on the spiritual plane. It might make us very good academics and might make us rich if we write books, but it won't give us spiritual knowledge.
Right.
Awareness, or it won't give us our own, dwelling on our own being, which we're seeking.
Right. Do you want to read your comment here?
Yeah. Jnana, the knowing which is simply being alone, is real. However, we know that Muruganar exempts from this wholesale condemnation of all forms of objective knowledge, Sutara in Tamil, the highest expressions of the truth in works such as the Vedas and Agamas. Ultimately, these are unreal also, it should be said, but since they point us to that which is real, they are accorded the status of knowledge by Muruganar. However, as long as the understanding of these remains on intellectual dualistic level, these are ultimately no more real than objective knowledge of any other kind. So just to make it clear that when Muruga's not saying that reading the Vedas and understanding the meaning will lead us to realization, but if we are reading those, they will be pointing us on the path to the correct practice. So in a sense, they're not unreal like the other kinds of objective knowledge. Is the point I was making.
Yeah. So the Vedas and Agamas. Right. So I'm just reading your point here. The Vedas and Agamas, ultimately, these are unreal also. But since they point us to that which is real, they are accorded the status of knowledge by Muruganar, but they are not, they are also unreal. But that's the key point. We just need to be focusing on that which they point towards, which is our own self. So with this, I will take a brief discussion break and see if there are any questions on the three Neris we discussed so far. On all deals with the point of mere theoretical knowledge, not focusing on that, but rather on one's practice more and more. Any questions?
Or comments?
Right. Okay. If not, we'll move on to our next section here, which is Muruganar's Neris on the avoidance of drugs and alcohol. Neris 70 and 71.
ஆவேச நீர்கள் அருந்தாதே ஏற்கனவே இயல்பாக ஆணவ மலத்தின் மயங்கி கிடக்கும் மக்கள் அபின் கஞ்சா முதலிய மயக்க வஸ்துக்களில் பின்னும் மகிழ்ச்சி கொள்ளல் இம்மை மறுமை இரண்டிலும் இடையறா துன்பத்துக்கு ஏதுவாம்.
Robert.
Do not consume intoxicating beverages. When people who are already naturally held in delusion by the egoic principle, Anava Malam, take opium, ganja, and other intoxicating substances and experience happiness as a result, that is the source of ceaseless suffering in both this life and the next. Quite a strong statement.
Yeah. The source of ceaseless suffering, not just in this life, but also in the next life. You're right. That's a pretty strong statement. So there is a conversation that happened. Let's look at this with Bhagavan. A devotee asked Bhagavan, is it harmless to keep on smoking? Obviously he's smoking and he wants to keep that going. And I actually had, this reminds me of a devotee here who said, is it okay to drink a little bit? I'm just not able to quit it. And it's like, no, you have to try your best, because if you keep on going, that's a problem too. So now let's see here what Bhagavan said. No, for tobacco is a poison. Better to do without it. Then the devotee asked, do you recommend that meat and alcoholic beverages be given up? Bhagavan responded, yes, it is advisable to give them up because this abstention is a useful aid. The difficulty in surrendering them is not that they are really necessary, but merely because we have become inured to them by custom and habit. Do you have any comments on this further, Robert?
Yeah, well, the key thing is that if you do maintain self-attention, then these things should not pose a problem anyway. So if you do have some, I mean, it's not only drugs, alcohol and things like that. There's many things which are addictive, so we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves. But the main thing is continue the practice. We could replace, a glass of wine, we could replace that with obsessive meditating, or, so basically the main thing is to give up the practice. These things will fall by the wayside quite easily if we just don't pay any attention to them.
But if someone is addicted, actually self-attention is a good antidote, actually, for them to help them get away from these things. The more and more they practice self-attention, the easier and easier it becomes to quit these break
the hold once, and just next time you do it for longer,
right,
it just disappears.
Right. Any questions or comments on this, or anybody wants to share their personal thoughts, struggles? Please feel free to. Everybody's quiet.
They agree with everything.
Yeah, well, Shovan, go ahead.
What about Nisargadatta Maharaj? He used to be a chain smoker, right?
No, he still was a chain smoker until he died.
Okay.
It's because the thing is, once you become a jnani, then it doesn't matter what you do.
Oh, okay.
Because he's lost the body. He's no longer that body. His profession was making and selling beedis, and he always smoked them. And he also ate meat.
Okay.
Not
Cool.
because he wanted to eat meat, because his family ate meat and they served it to him, so he ate it. But the scriptures say that for a jnani, we can't look at them and say they did it, because once they've overcome the ego, they've lost the body. These things, none of these rules apply to them.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Robert.
But I just don't understand what was the need for him to smoke.
Probably because before he was realized, he already had this thing. He'd always done it. We can't judge. We can't judge him on that basis, because once he's lost that attachment to the body, then it's just his what they call his prarabdha from his, that he had to go through in this life. And in the end, the smoking killed him, but he didn't complain about it. He died of throat cancer.
Yeah.
But he didn't bother him in the least, because it wasn't his body.
Right.
He didn't mind. But I'm not saying people should start smoking.
Yeah. So I do think we should think this slide here says it all. I mean, we as disciples of Bhagavan should just follow his recommendation here. It doesn't want us to get into any of those habits. And if we're already in it, we should try our best to do. He says here, better to do without it. So I think, and then the best way to do it is to practice self-attention. The more and more we practice, automatically all those vasanas will loosen up. As Bhagavan says in Nanyar, Tondrudatru Varihindra Visaya Vasanagal, Kadalalagal Pol Alavattanavai Tondrinum Avayavum Surubadyanam Kilamba Kilamba Lendividum. So if those vasanas which come from time immemorial, even if they keep on coming like the waves in the ocean, they will all be destroyed as self-investigation becomes more and more intense. Something like that. Just coming, saying it from my memory. So he gives us a real guarantee there that all of these attachments can be given up if we continue to practice self-attention. I did see a hand raised from Lakshmi. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to share probably about a year ago or so. Yeah, my wife and I decided just eating meat. And it seemed like, me, and probably several months before that, I stopped consuming alcohol. Slowly it seemed like there was like a natural progression before, Bhagavan, pulled me to him. And anyway, now, just to stop consuming anything is not a big deal at all, like for health reasons or whatever, if I have to just stop tea, coffee for a certain period of time, I'm able to do that, again. I think just learning about Bhagavan and having better control over our systems.
That's good. That's good. Thanks for sharing that. And I said, we'll be able to give up most of this habit. And in another quote, actually, Robert was talking about, where Bhagavan even includes caffeine in it. Isn't that right, Robert?
Yeah, it says quite a few things. Caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, morphine, cocaine, codeine, amphetamine, or whatever else it might be, under whatever name, form or disguise, avoid all drugs. Starting a habit is easy. Giving it up might take lifetimes. The more you have become acclimatized to habit, the harder it has become to give it up. That is why people find it difficult to give up the habit of thinking. It's man's oldest habit. Somebody's saying is that, okay, having a glass of wine is a habit, but just thinking is a habit. That's the ultimate habit,
right.
Which is an interesting point, and the most deadly, he says. Prevention is better than cure. People are tempted by curiosity to fall prey to all these substances. And then he ends in a fantastic way, really. Strangely enough, inquisitiveness along the lines of who am I alone seems rare. So people are inquisitive about everything. They want to try every drug, every possible trip, they want to go to visit every beautiful site, but the one thing they don't want to visit is their own being.
Right.
That is the fundamental question. Somehow people ignore this and are drawn to other curiosities. Well, we are, aren't we? We're just, we're very inquisitive creatures, and we'd much rather investigate something new than to persevere with what we genuinely feel is the thing we should be doing. Good. Which is investigating our own nature.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you. Any other comments?
This is kind of, I think it's a big topic that, of course, affects a lot of people's lives. What you consume, what you do, everybody has a vice. Right. Maybe in some way, some of us have. I will share a personal experience. I used I enjoy, hookah, which is like tobacco, like water pipe. I used to do it quite a bit. For many years, I was doing it, at least on a daily basis, and it was tied to a habit of journal writing, or just, come back home and just to do it. And it was something, I was doing way too much of it. It's not good for you. And it was kind of, at some point, I gave it up, and I still do it on weekends, but it was kind of, when I gave it up, the thing that I kind of found was that it was like you guys kind of said, it was the attachment to the thought of like, hey, I'm used to doing this every day. And that was the thing that was really difficult to give up. It wasn't like the physical, craving. It's not like cigarettes. But, this whole conversation reminds me of the story I think we discussed not so long ago about a man who went to somebody who he was told was, very enlightened guru to seek his advice. And when he went to go meet the man, he saw that he's smoking, he has a wife, he has, all these other things. And immediately he said, no, this guy's doing all this worldly stuff. I can't, this can't be a real jnani or guru. I can't talk to him. So he went to go see another Swami nearby, and, he told him about, I went to go see this great guru, but I was so disappointed when I went to go meet him. He was enjoying all these worldly things. So I automatically, I knew he couldn't be a guru, right? And the other Swami said, so, how did you, something along the lines of, disparaging the other guru, but the other Swami said, hey, I can't do what he does, in saying that he was doing these things from a point of being so detached from them. If you're detached from it, if it's not, like you said, once you get to that point of kind of, of realization, and you kind of, there's not that attachment to it, there's not that attachment to anything with your body, then it's kind of it doesn't, I'm not saying go do it, but it's kind of, to say it doesn't matter after that point, but yeah, until you get there, there's a lot of work to do and a lot of things to avoid, I guess.
Yeah, the sages are very clear on this, and it goes right through all the literature. They don't, the jnani doesn't have to do pujas, observe sacred times, be in certain places, avoid places like the cremation ground. Nothing applies to him when he's a jnani. So what he does, not your problem. Your problem is to learn to find your, if he's teaching you how to find yourself, you can't judge what you see, because you're seeing this man doing these things, but he's not there. There is nobody there. It's quite clear that in that silly man running around in the loincloth smoke, there's a guru that called Kundiswami near to Tirunamalai, that he just sat on a tinai the whole day, and he smoked and smoked and smoked. He didn't actually exhale. He just chain smoked the whole time, and people gave him fruit, and he threw it over his head, and it piled up in a big pile behind him. Kundiswami, he's famous. Some people that in Tirur in the 70s, they went to see him, people like Ram Ram Crowell and people like that. And they've written about him in the Mountain Path. The chap was a jnani. So why was he smoking? Who knows? I went to see Yogi Ram Sarat Kumar in 1980 with an American chap, and we sat there, and he just had a room. It was a dark room, littered with cigarette packets, no furniture, windows, and he just sat there and looked at it, and he chain smoked the whole time. And at one point, Tim turned to me and said, "He's burning up our karma." I don't know if he was, but you know, we don't judge these people. If we don't like it, we can go away. But if we think that, you know, we accept, if we take them as a teacher, then we accept and do as they say. They're not going to tell us to go and smoke, by the way, just because they appear to be doing it. I say appear because they're not actually there, unfortunately. We think they are because we see it. Bhagavan even said that, you know, that this idea that the jnani does have prarabdha until the body dies, this is only from the point of view of those that see him. From his own point of view, there's not even prarabdha for this life, because it's like, you might as well, you know, when you're seeing Bhagavan, you're just seeing reality. There's just emptiness or fullness. It's just, but there is no, the body you see is only in your imagination, as it were. It's a difficult concept, but anyway, we can't judge these people. If we don't like it, we can go away, but we can't judge them.
Right. So with that advice from Bhagavan and Muruganar, we will conclude this session.